Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about pawn races, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a situation where at a very basic level, both sides have a pawn or multiple pawns which they want to promote, and it's a matter of which pawn is quicker, which will get to the finish line and promote faster. So we're going to delve into this concept of pawn races through multiple different examples. They're obviously going to get more complex as the video proceeds, so let's jump into the most simple version. And this is a situation where both kings are so far away from the opposing pawn that they have no control or impact on that pawn's journey down the board. And so it's a simple matter of counting squares. Which pawn gets to the other side quick? Now, without these pawns here, that becomes even an easier task. With both sides having both pawns, you want to be able to consider, okay, which pawn do we push? Now, obviously, this pawn being blocked by the king, and similarly, the h-pawn blocked by the black king, it's quite clear that the first pawn which both sides are going to try to prioritize is going to be the unblocked pawn, being the b and the f pawn. So b4 and f5, b5, f4, you just count which one gets to the end quicker. And what you end up seeing is, okay, both pawns end up promoting at the same time. But then you realize there's this interesting opportunity to go queen to b5 check here. And after queen b5 check and queen takes b5, you've traded off the queens, and we enter a new variation of a pawn race. After the king moves, which it has to move to get this pawn down the board, you realize the one benefit that you have as white is that this pawn over here is first to push, right? And therefore, because it's a rook pawn, this is one of the properties of pawn races. When both pawns are rook pawns, the first one even has more importance, because when it reaches the end of the board, guess what? It stops the other pawn from promoting. So that's one of the key concepts of pawn races. You want to pay special attention when both pawns are rook pawns, because there's this interesting dynamic between the preceding queens that will appear on the board. So that was a very basic example, basically just counting squares. Let's move on to a slightly more advanced example where the king placement is going to decide if either side can win or if it's a draw. And that is typically what's going to happen, because you can just count the squares here, but what you're going to notice is that it might appear like both players make a queen and it's a simple draw, but of course it's not that easy, because the king is part of the equation now, and king to b4 is the very threatening move that black has up their sleeve, where they're simply trapping your pawn while still waiting to push their own pawn. And it seems like white is lost here, because you cannot push your pawn, but your king is also not fast enough to stop the opposing pawn. But there's actually a very nice move here, which is the move king to b6. And the point of this idea is that you're multi-purpose, right? You're doing two things at once. You're, first of all, preparing the move a5, where now the king controls that square and would help, but also you're getting further down the board to prepare to stop this pawn. And so the idea is, by going to b6 rather than c6, you have more flexibility. You can still stop the pawn, but you also have the ability to aid your own pawn into promotion. So now black has to make a decision. Both lead to a draw. If they push their pawn, well, now a5, and they can't take your pawn because your king helps, and this will end up with a draw, because even though black promotes first, white promotes. And this is, by the way, another thing I want to emphasize. That is not always a guaranteed draw. Like, sometimes the first side to promote, you can then win by either skewering the queen, or you could checkmate immediately, or by some other tactic, you win the game on the spot. But generally speaking, and in this position here, this is a very easy draw. And similarly, if black instead takes the pawn on a4 after king b6, the king is now again further down the board, and king to c5 will stop this pawn once and for all. And so very simple move once you see it, but it's a nice one to know, multi-purpose, trying to help your own agenda, pushing the pawn forward while also stopping the opponent's ideas. Now, the final example I have for you is kind of combining those ideas and also taking things to a completely whole new level, because this example here is very tricky. I'd urge you to pause. It's very difficult, but let's go ahead and delve into it. So, okay, basically, both sides have two pawns. They want to promote these pawns. Now, as white, if you're thinking which pawn should I try to prioritize promoting, the f pawn comes to mind. Why? Because it would promote with check. So f5 seems like a natural place to begin your exploration. Okay, they're going to go g3. Now, very quickly you see that if you just push your pawn, they're going to push, and even though you promote with check, they already have a queen on the board. This is a draw. No side can make progress. So after they go g3, you want to get your king in to stop this pawn rather than just going f6. So you're going to go king to e3. And after king e3, they can't push their pawn because you're going to be very quick here to take that pawn and win the game. But now they're going to leverage the other pawn they have. They're going to play d4 check, distracting your king away, and then they're going to push. And now it's actually black who's promoting with check and winning the game. So this takes us to a first major idea from this example, which is that you don't want to allow your opponent to move their pawns with check. So the king on d3 serves the same purpose as the king on d2, only now d4 doesn't come with check. So if they go d4 now, who cares? You can continue with f6, and this is actually better for white than the previous example. You're not going to lose, but you're still not going to win, because here they can go king to c4, for example. You push, but now d3, and this one comes with check. And after you move, now they push, and again they promote with check, and it's actually white who is not going to be able to win this game. It's likely going to turn out as a draw. So once again, we're in this dilemma. Where do we put the king? Because on e3, we allow d4 with check. On e2, we allow d3 with check. We go to king e1, the only winning move. And it's a gorgeous idea because it's so unintuitive, but once you realize the point, it actually makes a lot of sense. You're just avoiding d4 and d3 with their respective check, and now you're free to promote your pawn without worrying or having to spend time while allowing your opponent to make progress. And this brings us to the second stage of this solution. They're now going to continue by playing the move d4. You go f6, and here you're already winning. Their king is too far away and you're promoting. So if they just push their pawn to d4 and they continue pushing, again, you're the first one to promote. With check, you win the game. Their only option here is to move their king to c5 and try to stop this pawn with the king. And now, if you just push your pawn, they're going to be quick to stop it, and they're going to be able to take this pawn and then win the game with their remaining two pawns. So what you have to do is use now your other pawn. You go h5. Now, it might seem weird to spend a tempo moving a pawn that you're not really focusing on promoting, but notice that they're also spending a tempo retreating with their king, so it's completely fine. And now if they go d4, you continue f6, and once again, they have to spend that tempo, otherwise you're going to promote with check. And again, you cannot push, but you use your other pawn. Now, what's the idea of dragging this other pawn along the board for the ride? Well, the point is that eventually, what's going to happen, the other pawn is also going to be able to promote while also dragging the king, so you actually haven't lost tempo. You can imagine that if the king remained here and you didn't spend time with this pawn, it's almost like you just pushed your white pawn on the f file up, right? Neither side moved their king or pushed their other alternative pawn. And so it's just like a simple pawn race with the insertion of a king move and this h-pawn push. And the reason that benefits white is because this pawn now is also threatening to promote. So after d2 check and g2, you can go f8 promotion and then h8 promotion with check. So a nice example. It goes by a little quick. If that's the first time you've seen this, there might still be some questions that you have, yet to answer. But if that's the case, then I'd urge you to just play around with this position a little more. Maybe watch the last couple of minutes a little bit more. It's a very instructive example because it shows you many different points. First of all, avoid checks at all cost. So this idea of going king e1 at the right moment, super logical. And second of all, promote with check and prioritize doing everything with check for you. So a nice example there. Hopefully you enjoyed this video about pawn races. It seems very simple, just the name itself, but you can see there's a lot of subtleties, a lot of nuances, and it's an important skill to master if you want to take your pawn endgames to the next level. Make sure you subscribe if you're new around here, like this video if you learned something new from it, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.